The U.S. government is going to implode very much in the same manner that the former Soviet Union did, when the public became aware of how much the Soviet government was lying to them. They were bankrupted by their own corruption and economic failings, and they simply imploded. A chance to break free of this 300-year-old system of debt slavery that the world has suffered under, and go back to the idea of a public currency that is managed as a public utility to serve commerce and the people in the nation, and not act as a mechanism to transfer the real assets of the people into the pockets of the bankers.
70% of all gold production in the U.S. comes from a single state, Nevada. Conventional wisdom says that all the good deposits have been found. But one geologist who's discovered more than 30 million ounces of gold says he knows where to find Nevada's missing gold. And right now, he may be on the verge of being proven right. Investors and speculators can learn more at crushthestreet.com/gold.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I'm recording this as I'm watching the Dow Jones continue to make another leg down. And we got another guest today, and we're going to talk about some geopolitical, economic events. This guest is somebody who deciphers and looks beyond what is going on in the headlines. And his website is WhatReallyHappened.com. And the guest is Michael Rivero. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Michael, we know Wall Street donates tons of money to, let's say, a candidate like Hillary Clinton. The system at the moment, the global system, is melting down right now. In 2016, I mean, I looked at the stock market this morning and we're down another 400 points. My question is this: is it inconvenient for the powers that be and the elites to have the system implode on an election year with their candidate potentially going into the office in this current economy?
Well, obviously, anytime there's an election year, they want the economy to look good in order to support the incumbents who are running for re-election. But they have clearly lost control of the economy, and they lost control of it a long, long time ago. But they have been using the stock market as a political banner, rigging it to keep it in the green and waving it around like this big flag so that they can say, look, at the stock market, the economy must be doing good. The stock market's in the green, and if you're going hungry and you've lost your home and your job and your business, it has to be your fault, and you shouldn't blame us, the hardworking bankers and politicians. But even that is starting to fail because more and more people understand the stock market is being rigged and manipulated, like LIBOR was, like silver and gold prices. And so the conventional wisdom of the trend is my friend has been lost, and we're starting to see more and more investors actually sell the rallies. They're waiting for the market to move up, and that's an opportunity to get out with as much of their capital as they can. And at the moment, it looks like the riggers have given up trying to get it back into the green, and they're trying to have more of a controlled descent rather than an outright panic and crash. But they may not be able to head that off either, because anybody who understands investing in an overvalued market knows that when the correction comes, most people are not going to get their money out of the market, because when you have the stocks are so overvalued as they are now, there's nothing to support a decent price. And so when the market starts to plunge, the first people to pull their money out, they'll get their money, and everybody else is going to be left with a brokerage report with a very impressive looking number on the bottom, and that's all it's going to be, a very impressive looking number. So it's a very, very dicey situation. I don't see us getting to the end of 2016 without a major upset on the global economy, and all of this goes back to this horrible system of private central banks loaning the public currency into circulation at interest. Because by design, this is an economic system that manufactures more debt than it does money with which to pay that debt. The debt always exceeds the available money supply, and there's no way to reverse it. It is designed that way. And eventually, any nation that is enslaved to a privately owned central bank is going to collapse. Now, in the past, when these private central banks were operating independently and they got into trouble, the other private central banks around the world would get together and bail them out and restart them. But because of economic globalism, now all these private central banks are networked together. and they're going to be dragged down together. That's what's been happening. They're spreading the risk and the debt uniformly across the system until now the debt is threatening the system as a whole. This is going to be very difficult for people to get through, but in the long run, it's a good thing, because it gives us a chance to break free of this 300-year-old system of debt slavery that the world has suffered under, and go back to the idea of a public currency that is managed as a public utility to serve commerce and the people in the nation, and not act as a mechanism to transfer the real assets of the people into the pockets of the bankers.
So, Michael, do you think that it's possible that this collapse will happen, but then the elites will still have the power? They'll just repackage the current mess in some other form and take it to, what a lot of people are calling some new world order sort of agenda?
Well, I know that's what the New World Order agenda intends. I don't see it as happening because ordinary people have become much more sophisticated in their understanding of what's really going on with globalism and with economics. The reaction that we're seeing in Europe to the refugees being brought in to blur humanity into a single mass without a sense of regional identity, that's backfired horribly. So the New World Order agenda is in serious trouble. I think that when the economy implodes here in the United States, it's probably going to take the federal government with it, because the American people understand it is the federal government that 100 years ago sold us back into the slavery of the same predatory banking system we fought a revolution to break free of in the first place. And the politicians are not going to be able to get up there and say, give us another chance and we'll do better, because we know from past history they don't. As you were mentioning earlier in the program, Wall Street is pouring money into all these candidates to keep their little scams going. But when the United States was started, there were strict limits on campaign donations to a candidate on the simple principle that a candidate's war chest for the campaign was a true reflection of their popular support. That's why those laws were there. Well, over time, of course, those laws have been chipped away by corruption. We've had Citizens United to the point where the Congress and the White House are just one-stop shopping centers for all the corrupting influences in our society. And between vast amounts of wealth pouring out of Wall Street, big agriculture, big pharma, and simply buying the government that serves their interests, coupled with the massive election fraud that we've been seeing in this country, the American people have been completely disenfranchised. We've lost control over our own country, and the best option for us now is to kind of sit back, have a soft drink and some popcorn, and watch while the system continues tearing itself apart. Because I think what is about to happen is the U.S. government is going to implode very much in the same manner that the former Soviet Union did, when the public became aware of how much the Soviet government was lying to them. They were bankrupted by their own corruption and economic failings, and they simply imploded. And there was about 4 months where people had to take care of each other while they formed the new Russian republics. And life under the new Russian republics is considerably better than it was under the Soviet Union. And I honestly believe that when we come out of the far side of the coming confusion, that life in the United States is going to be considerably better than it has been for the last 20 years.
Michael, do you think that Donald Trump has a better and better chance as the economy gets worse and worse, because people will get more and more unhappy with what they are seeing and go to someone who's more extreme? Even a guy like Bernie Sanders, let's say, who's kind of out of the box of the establishment, and get away from the establishment candidate, which right now looks like it's Hillary Clinton.
Well, yeah, Bernie Sanders is like 2-1 ahead of Hillary up in New Hampshire. It makes me proud to have originally been a Granite Stater. I think Trump's attraction is on many levels. For one thing, he's a very plain-talking man, and people are responding to that because they're totally burned out on all this politically correct speech-making that the career politicians are doing. Americans understand that Donald Trump comes out of the world of business where your word is your bond, and if you get a reputation of not keeping promises, you are out of business, in contrast to professional politicians for whom lying every single day about everything is just what they do as part of their job, and people are responding to that. Now, I don't agree with everything Donald Trump is saying, but
Sure.
He is a breath of fresh air. And At the very least, he's going to shake things up. It's very obvious he is seen as a threat by the current inner economic governmental clique. They've been trying to give him the Ron Paul treatment. I'm very worried that if that fails, and it is failing, they may try the Robert Kennedy approach on him. But he's definitely shaking up the system, and I think he's the point of an anti-incumbency, anti-friend of Israel fever that's sweeping the nation this election year, and we're already seeing it. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is up against some serious competition in her primary. There's even word that John McCain could conceivably lose his re-election later this year. And so I think there's a general sense of we need to get the current entrenched career ongoing politicians out and put some new people in. And the new people may be just as bad, but at least they're going to go in there knowing that their jobs are not secure if they don't take care of the American people, and their names are written on their congressional office doors in dry erase marker. And that is going to motivate them to pay a little more attention to the American people, as opposed to someone like John McCain, who has just assumed it's his divine right to stay in Congress for as long as he shall live.
Yeah, talking about lying right in the face of the American people, President Obama at the State of the Union address, just with this confidence and just ignoring the facts that millions of people are unemployed, underemployed, just stating the 5% unemployment rate. And in a lot of ways, I mean, he's able to just mislead so many people because millions of people don't know the real numbers. And just him going up there and not even addressing those things is just leading people down this path of lies. And I think when the real underlying economy collapses and crashes, I mean, that's when the masses will understand that, you know, what they have is a bunch of lies. And I still don't know how the chips will settle, but I am sure that, you know, it's going to trickle down and people are going to be very unhappy with what they have. So
people are already unhappy. The polls are showing that the American people have never distrusted the government as much as they do now. Gallup did a poll just a couple of weeks ago where the vast majority of people they polled identified the U.S. government as the biggest problem in their own lives. And that is very significant. Now, the reason Obama is getting on up there and saying 5% unemployment is the federal government has become trapped by its own web of mendacity. They have been lying to the American people so long, they have to go online. They can't stand up there and say, all right, you caught us. We lied about the economy. We lied about the true scale of unemployment. We lied about 9/11. We lied about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. We lied about the assassination of John Kennedy. Because the first time they admit openly they've lied to the American people, the entire web of deceptions going back for the last century is going to unravel completely, and the government will fall. And so all of these politicians are obligated to stand up there and go on repeating the official story about everything, even when they're standing there knowing 90% of the people in the audience aren't believing it any longer. And everybody is already making fun of Obama's comment from the State of the Union, where he said, anyone claiming that America's economy is in decline is peddling fiction. And they're laughing at him now. Everybody understands that our government has been controlling the American people through lies, fraud, and deception, whether it's Saddam's nuclear weapons, Assad's sarin gas, some of the emails that have come out of the investigation into Hillary's email server have confirmed that the real reason the U.S. went into Libya and killed Gaddafi was to destroy the gold dinar, which was threatening to become a pan-African currency, displacing the U.S. dollar. Because right now, the entire U.S. economy depends on the world using the dollar for cross-border trade and banking. This all began at the end of World War II with the Bretton Woods Agreement, where the U.S. dollar took over being the global trade and banking currency from the British pound sterling. And back at the end of World War II, when accounts were still being settled with boxes of paper notes, if not outright bullion transfers, having a single recognized currency did make sense. But in this day and age of global instantaneous electronic financial transactions and confirmations, a single global currency is completely unnecessary. It's an obsolete idea. But the U.S. economy is dependent on maintaining that because we've allowed our manufacturing to decline because we've got all this free wealth coming in from other countries who have to borrow U.S. dollars at interest to conduct business with other nations. or borrow or to buy oil, the petrodollar deal. And nobody wants to buy our agriculture because of the GMO accident and the experiment, rather. And so as a result, the more countries that stop using the dollar for cross-border trade and banking, the less and less revenue is coming into Wall Street and the Federal Reserve, and it has to reach a breaking point. And that's why the U.S. has embarked on this program of war. These are wars on everybody daring to use other currencies than the dollar. In 2002, Saddam Hussein got permission from the United Nations to sell Iraq's oil for the euro instead of the dollar. 1 year later, he's got nuclear weapons. They invade Iraq. They lynch Saddam Hussein, and Iraq's oil is back on the world market only for the U.S. dollar. The same thing happened in Libya. Gaddafi set up a value-based currency. The gold dinar was looking very attractive to other African nations, and he announced Libya's oil was for sale, but only for the gold dinar. And that's when the U.S. invaded. They killed Gaddafi. The $7 billion worth of gold that was going to back the gold dinar has vanished. I think you can all guess where that went. And the American people were told, we're helping a Libyan revolution against a cruel tyrant dictator. And we now know that that too was a lie. We're learning that ISIS and Al-Qaeda were manufactured by the U.S. as straw men to dump into countries that need to be invaded, to force them back to using only the U.S. dollar. And all of this was actually blown wide open back in 2003 when General Wesley Clark, made public that the U.S. agenda was to conquer all the resource-rich areas in the Middle East in order to force them to sell those resources only for the U.S. dollar, so that anybody who wanted to buy those resources, mostly oil, would have to come to the United States and borrow dollars at interest or bring us manufactured goods and agricultural produce in exchange for ink and paper before they could conduct their business. And it's the way the U.S. has maintained an economic hegemony across the entire globe, but people are breaking away. The ruble is rising against the dollar in terms of political favorability, so is the Russian ruble. And the only thing the U.S. can think to maintain the status quo in its own favor is to get into another war. And the other reason they're trying to push so hard on starting wars is because of prior history, where every time the U.S. gets into one of these economic messes, they try and get out of it, or at least distract from it, by getting into a bloody world war. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and here we are, on the doorstep of big mistake number 3. And people need to remember that prior to the creation of the Federal Reserve, there was no such thing as a world war. It came in as a bundle. And right now, the U.S. government understands that if the economy implodes and they don't have somebody to blame it on, the American people are going to blame Wall Street and their complicit politicians in Washington, D.C. And that's why I think when the economy crashes, it's going to take the federal government down with it. And we're going to see a big push back to the restoration of constitutional authority to the states and local communities, and just go for a grand reset, going back to the system of government and the economic system that works for the people in the nation, rather than being a privatized for-profit venture by a bunch of private bankers who've got enough money to bribe Congress to sell us into their slavery.
Michael, that was an excellent articulation of what we are seeing, and I couldn't agree with you more. I wanted to just give you an opportunity to just share with us, what are you suggesting and what are your thoughts on how people should kind of move forward with this information here in 2016?
Well, obviously, everybody needs to be prepared to have the support mechanisms on which they're dependent now break down. Storable food, water, that kind of thing. We are already hearing talk about capital controls. If the economy starts to go down, the laws are already in place where the bankers can help themselves to the money in your savings accounts and your checking accounts, and you should have no more money in the banks than you need to cover your immediate obligations, because all of it is exposed. If the government decides they need to raid the people to keep the bankers alive, they're going to do it, and they've done it in the past. And you should be investing in silver and gold and small amounts so there's no record, because we also know back in 1933, the government ordered the American people to turn in their silver and gold to give to the banks. Our government doesn't care about the people. Our government gets their money from the bankers, and they're there to take care of the bankers. We're not a capitalist country any longer. We haven't been capitalists for 3 decades now. We have descended into outright, pure economic fascism, where all the losses are going to be dropped on the American people, and those who've got the money are allowed to keep it. And that really is the classic definition of fascism, is when corporate power and government power are aligned together against the general population. And that's not my definition. That comes from Benito Mussolini, who won the Olympic gold medal for being a fascist jerk.
Michael, if people want to learn more about you, where would they go and what would they find?
My website is called WhatReallyHappened.com. We've been running it so long, I forget how long I've been running it. It's over 20 years. We started it in 1994 with the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, which, thanks to Hillary Clinton's campaign, is current news again. I also do my own talk radio show on the Genesis Communication Network from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Central U.S. time, Monday through Friday. And you can listen to it either at gcnlive.com, or if you go to whatreallyhappened.com, during show time, there's a little player that pops up, and you can click that and listen to the show.
Michael, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your research with us here today at crushthestreet.com.
Well, thank you for having me.